Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural. Quite a few things went down in this episode, so let's break everything down. First of all, big focus of this episode is the fact is that Michael is performing experiments. Now, initially my thought was like, oh man, he's making these people drink blood. There's a little bit of grace mixed with it. I'm like, oh, obviously he's trying to make more angels. I thought that was the whole deal. But then again, it's like, yeah, he's kind of cast the angels aside, but maybe that's kind of the side. Either way, maybe that kind of still fits for what I'm saying. But it was like, because at first I thought those are humans, but it's like, no, they're vampires, which now I'm kind of like, okay, so he's basically, and because he makes a deal with the werewolves later on, so it seems like he's trying to supercharge almost every supernatural creature out there. I'm wondering, is he trying to amass an army? Are these new supernatural creatures supposed to be his new version of angels? Like, he doesn't have the angels to follow him, so he's going to be a god over these things. Like, once again, it's like, as an archangel amongst anything, you'd think you'd be the one that kind of be like, all like gung-ho about killing everything. But for him, it's like, the vampires and the werewolves in particular, they eat for survival. They're not like humans. They don't hunt just for, not for sport and game. So I guess, I don't know, like I said, we're still lost in what it is that he's exactly doing. We do see the effects later on because, like, obviously he was working out a lot of the kinks on the vampires, but he tries it on the werewolves later on. And we see that a lot of stuff that would normally kill a werewolf, like silver, doesn't slow them down. Some, chopping off their head did the trick, but still, if you don't get that chance, like the normal weaponry against a werewolf won't work. So that's just them. We have no idea what that would mean for a vampire. I'm sure chopping off their hair would still work too, but a lot of other things wouldn't. And like I said, this might be like an all supernatural creatures thing. Like, all the monsters out there in the world, he might try and supercharge them for what purpose? I don't know. Because it seemed like his whole thought process is like, oh, I'm going to do things better in this world than he did in his own. Because maybe he thinks angels are antiquated. It's like they can't get me what I need, but these monsters can. That's why I'm not understanding his reasoning behind everything. So, like, what is the benefit of doing all of that, making deals with them and everything like that? In this particular episode, he was talking to the alpha and everything. So, which is also kind of interesting too, because I feel like there's never been anyone that's like him. Like, in the sense of Michael performing experiments like that, no other angel has done stuff like that. Maybe some demons, sure, but not like because it's like I said, that's kind of the thing. I think that's a thing that this show does interestingly well. Interestingly, is the fact is it's kind of like, oh, not all angels are good guys. Oh, quite a few of them are dicks. Quite a few of them have been dicks in the past. So it's not something that's just way out there. But for him to go to the extent that he has, like I said, like no other angel would do that. I'm also curious, like, what the remaining angels think about this whole situation. Like I brought it up in the premiere. I was like, I'm surprised they hadn't reached out. But apparently he knows about them. He's kind of like, I'm not too worried about them. So I'm so curious to see what that ends up. Well, I mean, what this also means for them going forward. I mean, it sounds like he'd eventually wipe them out along with humans, because I don't remember. Like, I think they talked about it, like what the demons were like in the other world. Like, I don't think they ever expressly talked about how they became the way they did. So in retrospect, could it be like Michael's the reason why demons became like that? Because like the biggest issue in the other world were angels. So I don't know if like he's the reason why demons became like that. Was he secretly experimenting or something like that? Was that something no one knew about him actually doing? Was that like a well-kept secret? Because even Bobby was kind of like, I have no idea what's going on with all these creatures, stuff like that. Like, so I don't know. I also appreciate Bobby being like DFA because he meant DNA, and Sam's like, really, DFA? He's like, dude, I've been fighting the apocalypse for the past 15 years. My FBI needs a little work. Excuse me, so. And then at the end, there's a whole situation with, I'm Dean again, which I'm like, yeah, I don't believe that for a second. It's like, we have seen that Dean can slip through to a certain extent. He isn't completely taken over. I mean, because we saw that with Sam too, when Sam was originally taken over. I think as the true vessels, they have a little more, and also because they're stubborn as hell, both Sam and Dean. I think because they also have like that free will and they're also just stubborn as hell, but maybe them being the perfect host makes it so that they have a little more sway in that situation than most other people who were possessed. That's how I'm chalking it up, but maybe that's not the case. But the fact is, like, we know Sam fought back before, so is Dean. Um, but I think Michael didn't go away. I think it's like, no, he's pretending to be Dean, or at the very least, he's pulling Dean to the surface. I don't know. We kind of have to wait to the next episode to see what Dean talks about. I mean, Dean might still be like, oh, this and that is going on. If he doesn't give up too many details, it's like, yep, that's still Michael. But even if he does give up a lot of details, it's kind of like, yeah, but that might be part of Michael's game, which, like I said, we don't know what it is, what his plans are for this world. And that's actually all kind of an interesting thing all on its own, because another side of this episode dealt with the whole situation of Castiel balancing things with Nick as well as Jack. Like, let's talk with Jack, for example. Like, Jack, kind of feels powerless, because apparently because of his situation, it can take anywhere between a month to 100 years for his grace to come back, because he is half human. It's taking even longer to come back. The process will be even longer. But, Cassio knows that exact same situation he talks about. It's like, yeah, he was in a situation where he lost his grace. He thought he lost everything. But at the end of the day, it's like, I had Sam and Dean, and I had myself. Like, who I am at my core was still there. As long as you kind of have that, everything else, that you feel like you've lost, you can't, it's kind of like with time and effort, Jack can, grow from his experience, essentially, So, interestingly enough, he actually goes to visit his, grandparents, Kelly's parents. Never crossed my mind to even think about, like, oh yeah, Kelly's parents. Like, what about that whole thing? Obviously, like, he's sharing moments with them and stuff like that. It's kind of this sweet thing. Even his grandmother being like, you actually kind of look a little bit like Kelly. It would have been like, he couldn't ask for it, but I'm sure he would want to take one of those pictures with him. I'm sure he has, like, still the video that Kelly left him. I'm sure that's still something he has, but it's not like he could really explain to his grandparents, oh yeah, like, I'm your grandson, but he kind of talks about it like it's like, oh yeah, I was there seeing how she acts. And he's also didn't tell them about the fact that she's dead. It's like, right, they wouldn't know about that. Because, like, the whole, like, oh, I gotta go away for a while, I was like, oh yeah, her being like, yeah, I gotta, well, that might have been when she was on the run with the baby, or it might have been like after, after a while, and she was on the run in the sense of, like, Castiel was protecting her at that point in time, like, because you remember there's that phase between, like, after she got pregnant that she went on a run, and then, like, while she was, like, in the later stages of pregnancy, still on her. So at any point in time, that could have been when she was kind of saying, like, oh no, she's going away for, like, some work stuff. So I'm interested to see if that circles back into the story in some shape or form, because eventually her parents are going to start asking questions, and then there's going to be a whole lot of things in that regard. I mean, to be fair, well, not everyone, but quite a few of the people that are connected to, like, her, like, and everything, are no longer alive. A lot of them got killed. So I forgot who. I think, yeah, it was Ketch. Ketch ended up killing a lot of them because he needed to, like, make, control the situation. So there's that. So there might not be a lot of people around to be able to answer any questions if they had any, but that still could be something we end up seeing. So for now, it seems like that might be just kind of left as it is. So, but along with all of that, you have Jack, saying that he needed to do that, because he's hoping, he's like that line of, like, oh yeah, I hope that one day I can have the courage and purpose that she had. And it's just, it's kind of, because that is sad, because, like, he never got to really know his mom. He knows that she protected her. He remember her warmth, but he never got to know her. And this is kind of his best way to know, because, like, no one else knew her. It's not like Cassio really knew her. And it's like not like Sam and Dean really knew her. The only people who would know her are her parents. So, but Jack said something that really shocked me, where it's kind of like, wait, we're going to try and capture Michael, we need to kill him. And Cassio's like, what? No, what are you talking about? He's like, no. He needs to die. Like, what he did to that other world, we can't let that happen in this world. And the fact of the matter is, if it, like, if we can save Dean, awesome. But if we can't, we can't let that happen to this world too. And it's like, yeah, you kind of understand where he's coming from. You're like, yeah, he makes a lot of sense. It's something even Cassio is like, he understands it as well, but he doesn't want to accept it because it's like, Dean's such an important part of their lives. I mean, I'm sure he's not as important to, because obviously, like, Jack doesn't have the connection to Sam and Dean like Cassio does. He does, like, in a sense of like, oh yeah, he kind of has formed, they've kind of shaped their relationship and they're kind of being like brothers. But at the same time, it's like he hasn't been through as much with the Winchesters as Cassio has. So there's like a much deeper bond there. So, and just, when it comes to those brothers, there's always something in that regard. So it's kind of like, I mean, there's always a possibility. There's always a Lucifer situation that could happen. Apparently, like I guess if you get like an Archangel blade and go about that route, but I'm guessing that's not something you can just casually do. Like it would probably either there's a good chance it would end up killing uh Dean, or the fact of the matter is it just wouldn't be of any use, like because an angel like an archangel's blade won't mean anything in anyone else's hand, so you would need another archangel to do what he did to Lucifer to make it so like, oh yeah, Nick is still alive while Lucifer himself is dead. So there's that whole situation. So I doubt that, we know that Michael's literally last of his kind, so I don't see any of that happening. Now, interestingly enough, it's the other side of things, which that whole Nick storyline completely caught me off guard in a regard of like his wife and his daughter. It's like, his wife and his son. It's like, oh wow, we're bringing a storyline back that like really hasn't, like Nick himself it's kind of interesting because Nick was never like an important character. It's just like, oh, he's the body that Lucifer possesses. Like he kind of stopped being relevant the moment like he got possessed in wasn't that 5? He became Lucifer's host. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's so interesting. Now we're kind of getting all this backstory to Nick about his family and stuff like that, why he said yes. Because I don't think it was ever clarified why he did say yes. But I think, his brain is a little scrambled. He's remembering bits and pieces about what he did as Lucifer. Cassio having a hard time looking at it. It's kind of interesting because I talked about like he understands Jack's position. He also understands Nick's position too because he was possessed by Lucifer at one point in time. Which even at that time I never thought about it like in a sense of like, all right, it's got to be weird because like that was Jimmy's body. Well, Jimmy was dead at that point too because Jimmy died in season, wasn't it 8? No, 7 when he exploded. And all those, it's when the Leviathans were in his body and he exploded. That's when Jimmy died, if I remember correctly. So it was just kind of purely his body at that point in time. So Jimmy no longer existed at that point. So, because I was thinking like, oh, it must have been weird, like 3 people preoccupying the same body. It's like, no, at that point in time, it was, by the time Lucifer possessed his body, it was only him and Cassio in there. But so he can kind of understand both sides. He can understand Jack as well as Nick in their respective situations. But what's interesting is that Nick seems to have like some little trigger in him that the moment Cassio was trying to touch him, he just like stopped and just like pointed his finger, like his hand in Cassio's face and snapped and was like, whoa. It seemed like it was some kind of reflex, like subconsciously he did that. But then he didn't even realize he did. He's like, what are you talking about? Do what? So, and it's even something Cassio was like, the damage that was done to his psyche is a lot more than they thought. Because now he's becoming so obsessed with this murder that happened to his wife and son. Because the question is like, was it a person? Was it something supernatural? That becomes the thing. He ends up visiting the guy Artie, but Artie doesn't give him the answer he wants. Like, obviously you can tell Artie's covering up some stuff, but the question is like, what is he covering up exactly? And so he starts choking Artie a little bit, and then eventually we cut back to it. He beat Artie, bashed his skull in with a hammer. So that opens up many different questions. Was it Nick himself he saw? Like all that time ago, like he saw Nick do it, but then maybe Nick came back later on as Lucifer and scared him into not saying anything because it looked like he was terrified, or maybe he really didn't see anything that night. But in his broken kind of mind state, Nick is just so obsessed. It's like, no, obviously you saw something. But the fact is he bashed him in with a hammer, like bashed his skull in, which is the same way his wife and son died. It makes you go, okay, so either he's the one that did it, or because his mind is so broken and he knows that's the way his family died, he killed Artie the same way. So he might have nothing to do with, like I said, it might be something supernatural, but either way, Nick is not stable. So That's definitely going to play an interesting part because like I said, it also seems like a lot of that stuff he's doing is subconscious. Like the whole what he did there seems like it was subconscious. So maybe that plays a role in it. Because I was like, who's to say nothing happened? Well, because it seemed like because his family was already gone by the time the whole thing with Lucifer happened. So I mean, Lucifer might have set that all in motion at a time because Lucifer had a lot of stuff laid out, planned out in that regard. So I mean, going to Nick probably wasn't an accident because it's like out of anybody, why did he choose Nick to be his host? I'm sure there's so many people in this world. Why Nick specifically? So that begs the question. Like there had to be some like groundwork that Lucifer laid out beforehand. So I'm interested to see where this whole thing with Nick goes. Like how that continues forth, because that means like, yeah, he's not Lucifer anymore, but we still can't 100% trust him because he's legitimately not right in the head, and I don't know if there's any repairing that. I mean, it's kind of like Sam's soul, because it's like, yeah, his soul kind of got like beat the crap up inside of the cell, so it might be a similar thing, so I mean, because amongst anyone, he had loot like Nick has had Lucifer in his head for a very, very long time. So, I mean, like I said, it's a very interesting thing. A lot of stuff went down in this episode. So, I'm so curious to see what this all turns out to be, going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good